Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today we will look at editing tree views by inserting new nodes using a pop-up menu within your dialogues. This is a TreeView application as we left it at the end of the last video. The tree is pre-populated and you can quite happily select items on the tree and you can edit the names of them by hitting the F2 button. And we can also view what is in the tree. What we're going to do today is we're going to add a pop-up menu that can be selected by right-clicking on any of the nodes, and this will allow you to insert a new node either before or after the selected node. Let's have a look at the code. At the beginning of our code, we had a couple of constants set up previously to handle the events when the node was edited and when the edit was completed. We're going to add two new events today, one for inserting before and one for inserting after. So the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to detect a right click on the tree control. So if we go to the callback function, which is our event handler, we'll see in here there is already a notify section that handles all commands coming back from the tree view. We're going to add a new one today to handle right clicks. And the first thing we want to do when the right click has been triggered is we'll want to set focus to the tree control itself. We've already picked up the Windows handle of the tree control up here at the top of the code, and this is being held in a static variable, so its value will be maintained. So we're going to use one of the Windows API calls called setFocus, and we'll set focus to the tree control. Now once the user has actually done the right click, we want to display a pop-up menu on the screen to allow the user to select whether to put the new node before or after the node that's currently selected. So we'll need a new function to perform this. So we'll create a new function called trackPopup. We're going to have to pass it some parameters, first of all being the handle of the dialog, and we'll need to give it the handle of the pop-up menu, which we haven't created yet. So we're going to create a global called htmenu, and we'll make this left aligned. And then once that's done, we can quite happily exit this function. So before we go any further, we want to create our menu. And after creating the menu, we'll then create our new function to display that menu. So as we've created this new global handle, we want to declare this right at the beginning with all the other globals. So we've created one menu already. This will be menu number 2. So we need a little function to manufacture this menu, and we'll want that called when the tree view is created. So back to our callback function again, and in here we have a populate tree view, and after the tree view is populated, we'll want to create our new pop-up menu. So we'll manufacture a new function whose job it is to just do that. So we'll call this create tree view pop-up menu, and again we're passing it a single parameter, in this case the handle to the tree view, because once our pop-up menu is created we want to attach it to the tree view. So let's pop down to the end of the code and we will create our new function to manufacture this menu. So as we did in the function above, we're going to create a new pop-up. We're going to add 2 entries to this pop-up, one to insert a node before and one to insert a node after. And these will be the events that will be triggered when the user selects that from the menu. The final thing to do in this function is to attach our new pop-up menu to the tree view using the menu attach command. Now that we've done that, we should have a pop-up menu. So the next thing to do is we will now create our new track pop-up, which will position the menu on the screen. So as we saw before, this new function is going to take 3 parameters: the dialog handle, the menu handle, and the flag to say to left align it. So we'll create some local variables in here: a Windows handle, a result, and a user-defined type called point, which is basically the X and the Y coordinates. Now we need to position the menu on screen near to where the mouse is. So the first thing we'll have to do is to figure out where actually is the mouse on the screen, and we can use a Windows API call called getCursorPause, and we'll pass to it a single parameter, which is what we want to populate, which is this point user-defined type, which is an X and Y coordinate. Now at this point we haven't populated a Windows handle, so we need to pick that up using our X and our Y coordinates, which are stored in the user-defined type. And assuming we've actually passed in a dialog handle, we'll now want to send a message back to the dialog to initialize our menu using the send message command with the dialog handle, the command to initialize the menu, the handle of the menu, and a byval0 at the end. So having done that, the next thing to do is to call another Windows API function to position our pop-up on the screen. Again, we're giving it the X and the Y coordinates to position it, we're giving it the Windows handle, and we're giving it the handle of the menu itself. And assuming this gives us back something other than 0, we can do a final send message command, and this should effectively position our menu on the screen. So let's give that a try. And there we have our nodes. If we right click, we're now getting a menu coming up on the screen. Now we have no code behind the menu yet, but the menu is quite happily appearing on the screen wherever we click. So now we have a menu, let's put some code behind it. So back to our callback function to put the events in. So if we go down to our WM command, we want to slot in our two new events. Now in here we have our edit event and our end edit event for the tree control. This is where we want to put our two new events in. One for inserting before and one for inserting after. So let's tackle the insert before first. So now that we know the user's actually clicked on insert before, the first thing to do is to pick up the handle of the node the user has actually clicked on. We can do that using the TreeView getSelect command, as we have done before. Next thing to do is to get the handle of the payment of this one. So we take our node we've clicked on to each node, and then we use the getPayment command to figure out what the payment is. So having worked that out, we need to determine whether the node the user's clicked on has a previous sibling or not. So we can use the TreeView getPrevious, again using each node, which is the one the user's clicked on, and we'll pass the value to each item. If each item is actually 0, it will mean that the node we have clicked on has no previous sibling. So we can actually test that. So if the value does come back as greater than 0, we can insert it after the previous sibling. This gives the position in the tree to put the new node in. If there is no previous sibling, then we insert it as the first child of the payment node. So again, this is a simple TreeView insert item command, which we've used already. To insert the new item, we're specifically hard coding it as new item. So we're inserting this into the tree immediately after the node pointed to by each item. Now we aren't at the moment specifying what the graphic icon is to be on the node. We'll come back to that one later. And if we're inserting as the first child of the payment, we can use the TreeView insert command again. The only difference being this time we will actually use the TVI first option. This will allow us to insert it in as the very first item after the payment. So if we try running that code now, we haven't declared our variables yet. Okay, let's put a few new variables in then. We need to define the each item at the beginning of the function. So we'll slot that one in there, and we should be able to run now. Right, so if we pick an item, right click on it, and we'll try and insert before, and there's our new item going in. Now it's picking up the icon for the original node in the tree, but we'll come back to that one later. So we can see there's a new item there, which we can select, hit the F2 button, and edit quite happily. So we've now managed to insert an item before. So the next thing to do is to put the code in to allow us to insert an item after the selected one. So let's have a look at that. So here's our event to insert after. We're going to take the same logic here as we did earlier. Firstly, get the handle of the node the user has actually clicked on. We'll save that in the HNode variable. And then we will get the handle of the payment. and we'll save that to the payment variable, and we will then insert the node after the first node selected. The code for this one is a little simpler. Again, we'll double back shortly and we'll sort out the icon. So let's just test the logic. So there's the item selected. We can now insert before the item, and we can also insert after the item. And we can edit both items quite happily. As we've got quite a lot of things on the tree now, I think having a scroll bar on the item selected is a really good idea. So let's just do that now. Run it back to the form, and we will change the properties to allow us a vertical scroll bar. Vertical scroll bar, put that one in. And if we run this now, and now we can see everything. So it's quite correctly putting an item before and an item after. All we need to solve now is the icon. Ideally, if we're inserting a new item in the non-fiction books, we want the same icon that's shown here to show up. So how can we do that? If we have a look on the help first of all, we'll see on the TreeView statement there are many commands. For expanding trees, contracting trees, putting checkboxes in, making things bold, getting childs, doing the count. However, although there is a command to set the image list on a tree control, and when you insert a new node on the tree, you can specify the item in the image list to be used, there is no specific command in this set to allow you to determine the icon that has been put on a TreeView control. Now, as we've seen, there can be two icons, one for when it's selected and one for when it's deselected. However, there is a command we haven't used yet, which is the set user command. The set user command allows you to set a long value against any node on the tree. We're going to use this to store a numeric value, which will allow us to determine which icons have been used on which nodes. So let's nip back to the code. So if we look at the populate tree view, which was the function which initially populates all the data within the tree. Now we're going to create a new long variable called image data. And this is going to be used to store a value. As we can only store one long value, we have a small dilemma. We have two icons for each node, but we only have one long value to store this in the tree. So we're going to use a command we haven't used before to actually combine both of these values into one long. So down here we have two variables, one for the unselected value of the node and one for the selected value. It just so happens for this particular node they're both the same. You could quite easily have these as different icons to indicate that a node was selected. So we're going to store this new image data using the mac command. What the mac command actually does is we're storing into this long variable two integers. Now these are single digit numbers, so we can quite happily say we're going to put into a long the lower value and the higher value of the long. And we'll reverse this to pull the information out. This allows us to save two values in the one variable. Once we insert the item into the tree view, we want to save the image data using the set user command, like so. Tree view set user, dialog handle, tree view handle, the item, which is the node, which we picked up here, and the value we're storing, which is long image data. And the same approach for each of the master nodes, one for fiction and one for non-fiction. Store the value in image data, and after we've inserted the item, we will insert the value into the tree control. And exactly the same for the non-fiction ones. Now I know this value hasn't changed in the last set of code, but you may well have a different icon for each of the master nodes. And the final one, once the item has been inserted, we will insert the data into the user area. Now for the actual books themselves, we'll be using a common function, add node entry. We will take exactly the same logic for this one as we did in the previous one. We'll set a new variable up at the top to store our image data. And for each of these, we will actually store the data in this variable, fiction, and for the non-fiction one, which this one does actually use two separate values for selected and unselected, we will put it in as so. The lower one being the unselected and the higher one being the selected value. And remembering to save that data into the tree once the node has been inserted. Like so. Now, having put that data into the tree, we'll have to get the data back out again so that when we insert a new node, we will pick up the correct image. So back to our callback function where the event handle actually sits. If we have a look at the event which triggers when the insert has actually been done, there's a little bit of extra code we need to put in here to work out the image that this particular node is actually using. So we create a wee bit of space here. So we're getting the handle of the node the user has clicked on. So we want to determine what image this node actually uses. So we're going to use the TreeView getUser command to pull back the value from this node and place it into the long image data variable. And once we have that, we want to have a variable to pick up the unselected image and one for the selected image. So we'll need a couple of new variables for this. So we'll set these up at the top of the code. So we've got our image data, we've got our unselected image and our selected image. So having got the value into the image data, we now want to pull it out. So to reverse that procedure we used before, we use the low command. We want to get the low value out of the image data variable as an integer, and we want to save it into the unselected image variable. And we do exactly the same for the selected image. So you'll be pulling two different values out of the one variable. And having got those two values, the unselected and the selected values, we can replace these zeros with these variables. One for unselected and one for selected. So now when this node gets inserted, it will get inserted with the correct image. And exactly the same logic down below, one for unselected, one for selected. And we will take the same approach for the insert after. Immediately after we pick up the node handle, we want to pull back the getUser, populate the image data variable, and get out of that the unselected and the selected image. And again, just as we did before, we will then use those two variables when we insert the item. So let's see how that's affected the running of the program. So we nip into our code and we click on a node, right click, insert the node after, and it has correctly picked up the new item with its image. And if we select that, we'll see that the icon is changing when it's selected and unselected. And if we do a insert node before, it is also selecting that. So just to check it's working on the fiction ones as well, we will insert a node before and we'll insert a node after. So it's picking up the icon quite happily. You can also in this code insert a node after to create a new node with the folder icon. So there's a great deal more you can probably do with the tree control, but I think we've given you a lot to work with today. We've quite happily added new nodes with specific icons, both before and after the selected node. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.